It's us that needs to wake up. It's us that needs to learn unconditional love so that we can teach it and show it and live it for them. And it's never going to go the other way around. And it never should. A 2-year-old should not be teaching me how unconditional love works.
I
That's
know.
bananas.
It's so
That's
great.
bananas.
So it's there's that surrender to being willing to transform into a whole nother kind of parent, which means that you start seeing your child for who they really are. You surrender all of your hopes and dreams that were unrealistic and based on air and movies. And you start realizing, okay, let's get real here. Let's see these children that are living in my home and what they're capable of and what they need, and how to support them in the best way possible for them, not for the outcomes that I'm attached to, but for the outcomes they're capable of.
I wrote down a few just key memories for me of things that were helpful to let go of and also hard. The vision you have for your child's life being even not just successful, but what you would define as safe. I had to let go of any vision of my child's life because I don't know the steps to get to where their life is going to be. So there's that, but there's also the idea of the timeline. And there's such a implied timeline with parenting. I mean, everywhere you go, they're like, these are the benchmarks. Here's the where they should be. Here's the chart.
Here's the
It's a part of parenting.
the milestones.
Exactly. Milestones. Thank you. I could not find that word. But it's such an ingrained part of parenting, and you just have to throw it away with these kids. They're hitting some of their physical development milestones. Great. If they're not, great. But they have to make up for lost time, no matter what. Even if you brought them home as an infant, they're set back. They're not going to be on the same trajectory with all of their skills as a typical kid. And that doesn't just affect their school years, that affects when they launch, that affects how launch might look if they launch. There's just so much that if you dwell on all the ways it's disappointing you or all the ways it's impacting you, you're going to live in a constant state of being burdened, being a victim, and feeling not rewarded by your parenting journey because everything is going to be a disappointment, every single aspect.
Right.
But when you can drop them, and the timeline was the hardest one for me, when you can drop them, then you can. There are things to celebrate when your kid isn't set up to fail at every new challenge. They're never going to be beating the timeline, as far as I can tell, in my experience. So you set them up to fail when you cling to that.
And then when that's happening, then the poison of bitterness sets in. And what's one of the things I see in Facebook groups sometimes for adoptive parents, a kind of bitterness. It feels poisonous, right? That the kind of, I don't know if it's hatred. It reads like hatred of the child and of their own lives. And this breaks my heart because I know it's about not making the transformation, and probably because they weren't exposed to it. They didn't listen to this podcast and realize there's another way to look at all of this. And we need to step out of the box of, quote, normal and get into the reality of, hey, this is our beautiful life. And it can be beautiful however we want it to be. It probably will be messy, and it'll probably be a lot more dirty than we want it to be. And it'll probably be louder and less planned and more structured, not less planned, more structured, things like that are just like harder in a way, but also not if you expect it, right? If you just expect it in the same way you expect the normal things, then, you're up for anything, right? You're ready for anything, because our kids have a trajectory of their own. They're on their own time frame. They're on their own learning. They have their own skill set. They have their own capacities and capabilities, and they will actualize those things in their own time, at their own pace. And there's nothing we're going to do to make that faster. There are lots of things we can do to make it slower, which is by blowing them up all the time, by pushing them too hard, by making demands of them that are too much for their fragile brains, right? Their brains have been traumatized, which means their bodies and minds are operating in a completely different way than neurotypical children.
When you realize that my clinging because I don't want this to change me is going to slow my kid down, I feel like that can really open you up. You can take that disappointment and that grief, and it can break your heart, or you can use it as like rage. It kind of goes either way. Breaking your heart feels like the worst outcome, but it's actually the best. I feel like because then you really sit in those feelings. It breaks your heart. You feel all those incredibly difficult feelings, and then you realize you can survive them. But if you cling to that anger and that bitterness, you're not learning what you can do. You're putting all the work onto your kid, right? You're saying, I'm not going to let you change me. I'm not going to let you change my life. You have to fit into this box, which they can never ever do. Or they break your heart. You realize that you're still there. You can do it, and you stand up, and the new you goes forward, and you get to know your kids, and you honestly you get to know your life, and what it's actually going to look like. And it can be a beautiful life if you're fully open to it being nothing like what you expected.
Right. So becoming present in the life you have, with a kind of openness, radical acceptance with radical compassion, and also a sense of self love and self care and wellness for your entire family, right? Really taking on a more holistic look at things, um, more in the moment things. Like you start really learning what beauty is in every moment, what glimmers of joy are in every moment, the moments of connection that just feel delicious, unless you forget that they're delicious, right? But they are delicious and they're healing and they're sort of like cobblestones of a path to the future. And what I know now that I didn't know then when I got my kids is that the future comes, right? And if you have cobbled a path and you're walking down a path of love and acceptance and compassion, your kids do grow up and they do love you in the end, right?
They
They
do.
they do love you and you love them. That was the whole point of bringing children home for me, was to have that. I just had to wait for it. And I'm a better person for having waited for it, actually. And I am much more resilient. I hate the concept of trauma makes you stronger. I don't love that. I don't think it's true. I think it makes us a little bit harmed, very harmed sometimes. Um, and going through the process of the transformation, of the miracle, of the paradigm shift, whatever you want to call it, the blessing of it, of the new way of looking at things, brings about resilience. I mean, I can literally go through anything now that I have raised my children, and I feel good about that. I don't feel like because I'm made of stone now. That's not it. It's because I am actually made of love now. And love actually is stronger than steel or stone or any other thing.
I know myself in a way I could never have known myself otherwise. I was very much operating in a predetermined program that was like middle age, middle class white lady with children, right? I was ignorant to so much of the world. And I was like, it's Thanksgiving, we do this. It's Halloween, we do this. It's a birthday party, we do, like I just didn't think. I wasn't seeing the world in its fullness. And it was an assault on me to have to really examine, why do I expect these things? Who are these things for? What is this demand based on? And so you have to look at your entire belief system, your whole paradigm for seeing the world. And I agree with you. Like, I would also be strong if I had two loving parents that showed up for me, but I know myself in a way that I am truly grateful for. And there was a lot of releasing shame and expectation involved in that process that I think was really good for me. Releasing my attachment to what other people think about me, that was great for me.
Mhm.
And hopefully I've been able to set that example for my kids. But the self work and mindfulness and nervous system care and all the tools that I had to adopt along the way to be able to be the person I needed to be for my kids, I don't know if I ever would have done that
Mhm.
had I had an easier path. And I don't know that I would be able to show up for people that are hurting in the way that I can if I hadn't been a person that was in that space. So in that way, I feel the same as you. I feel like I'm better for it, for showing up for my child in that way. Had I had an easier time showing up for them, I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have made me mad. I would have loved that actually.
That sort of brings us to the other side, which is okay, now that you're awakened, and you have a paradigm shift and you're transforming, well, there's generally some, you know, scorched earth behind you that
That's great.
that needs a repair, right? That actually is very healing to learn that repair is possible, that children will accept repair, not the first time perhaps, but eventually. And especially when you have a heart for repair, right? When your heart is truly in it, just saying you're sorry, yeah, I'm sorry, I was like that, I didn't know better. That is not your heart in it, right? But truly a transformation involves the compassion and the sting of truth that, wow, I I really owe you an apology and a repair and a change. I owe you this transformation, and to hold hold it precious and hold it every day so that you can depend on it and I don't keep taking it away by going back into the old ways.
The vulnerability of an authentic repair is, I think, one of the most healing things that you can have in a relationship with your child. You're putting yourself out there completely in a fully unprotected posture. You're telling them that you caused so much pain because of choices you made and it was not their fault. And you have to get to that place mentally before you can make an authentic repair. But the layers of that, they don't have to accept it, that they may use it against you in a difficult moment later, and you just have to accept that. You're showing them that you're flawed, and that can feel a lot like I'm going to lose ground here. It's real hard to make an authentic repair and to walk that road from that point forward. Of course, you'll mess up, but to come from that vulnerable place of I am a flawed human being, and I won't pretend that I know what's better for you all the time. I will have to take what you're saying into account if I'm genuinely going to authentically parent you. And the safety of authority is hard to let go of. It's not real safety, but the perceived safety of being the authority is hard to let go of. And when you are vulnerable and you say, I hurt you, I caused additional damage, you're starting a real relationship with that kid.
Yeah.
And I think in our society, that's not normal and it's not something you see modeled. And it feels like surrendering to them. And I guess it kind of is, right? In a way.
Mm-hmm.
But
It
it's
is.
but it's important. It's vital, I think.
I think it's surrendering the power over point of view.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
it.
I mean, you get to have power as a parent, and your children get to have power as children, but we don't have to have power over anyone. And we don't actually have that much power over them anyway, and they show us that pretty darn quick. Um,
Right.
but we keep insisting that we should be able to have power over them, and somehow, if I yell at them enough, or I punish them enough, or I make myself bigger and more scary, I'll get some power over them. But it just doesn't come. So
It
that's a
never works.
that's a faulty construct in and of itself.